Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The big meeting has happened in Russia. Prime Minister Narendra Modi met Chinese President Xi Jinping. It was their first bilateral meeting in 5 years, and it comes days after the two sides announced a border deal. What did the leaders say? What are the key takeaways? We'll discuss all of that. We'll also talk about another important meeting in Kazan between Prime Minister Modi and Iran's President Pezeshkian, the first since he took office and in the middle of Iran's conflict with Israel. Plus a special report on what forced Xi Jinping to agree to a border truce now. Meanwhile, in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been exposed again, this time by the Canadian press. His team leaked classified intelligence against India to the Washington Post. And India is apparently working on a counter-strike. We'll tell you all about it. In West Asia, pressure piles on Netanyahu to sign a deal and get the Israeli hostages back home. In India, 170 flights received hoax bomb threats in the last 1 week. We'll tell you what the government is doing about it. In the US, why Kamala Harris is heading to red states like Texas and why Donald Trump is campaigning in blue states like New York. In Turkey, President Erdogan vows to go after the followers of Fethullah Gulen, his exiled rival who is now dead. Can a diamond injection in the sky undo climate change? And how South Korea is fighting loneliness with a $300 million project. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Gunmen launched a deadly attack in Turkey, targeting the headquarters of the state-run aerospace company in the capital, Ankara. Turkish officials call it a terrorist attack. Many people are feared to be dead. Several have also been injured. No group has claimed responsibility yet. Riots rocked Portugal's capital, Lisbon, for the second consecutive day. It erupted after the police shot dead a black man who reportedly attacked them with a bladed weapon. Anti-racism groups have questioned the official version of events. The UK and Germany sign a major defense deal. It will allow German planes to operate from British bases and counter Russia. The pact is part of a wider push by the Starmer government as it looks to reset relations with key European allies. London and Berlin are two of Europe's biggest defense spenders. Thousands rally in Mozambique's capital, Maputo, ahead of election results. The ruling party is widely expected to win. The opposition has warned that the results could be rigged. Election observers from the EU have also raised concerns over the legitimacy of the polls. Boeing reports a whopping $6 billion quarterly loss. It comes as it faces a 6-week-long labor strike. The embattled aviation giant has also been under scrutiny over safety issues. Earlier this month, Boeing announced that it was cutting 10% of its workforce. And in India, Odisha and West Bengal brace for Cyclone Dana. It is expected to make landfall in Odisha tomorrow night. Thousands of people living along the eastern coast have been evacuated. Several trains have been cancelled and schools shut.
हमारे इतने रिश्ते हैं कि मुझे ऐसा लगा कि आपको कोई अनुवाद नहीं चाहिए.
ब्रिक्स देशों के बीच फाइनेंशियल इंटीग्रेशन.
Mr. Prime Minister,
सीमा पार पिछले 4 वर्षों में उत्पन्न हुए मुद्दों पर बनी सहमति का हम स्वागत करते हैं.
It's probably the handshake of the decade. 2 nuclear-armed neighbors, 2 rising economies and 2 population giants. It doesn't get bigger than this. We can put all the speculation to rest now. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has met President Xi Jinping. Not for a casual pull aside, not some informal meeting at dinner. This was an official bilateral talk, their first in nearly 5 years. Modi and Xi first shook hands for the cameras. As you can see, the Prime Minister had a characteristic smile, and Xi Jinping, as unreadable as always. Both of them appeared to exchange some pleasantries. After that, it was time for talks. Modi and Xi had their delegations with them. You may recognize some of these faces. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar was seated next to Prime Minister Modi. You can also see his National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. Now, Xi Jinping was the first to speak. He talked about improving communication, handling differences, and setting an example for the world. Listen in.
China and India are both ancient civilizations, major developing countries, and important members of the Global South. We are both at a crucial phase in our respective modernization endeavors. It best serves the fundamental interests of our two countries and two peoples, for both sides to keep to the trend of history and the right direction of our bilateral relations. It's important for both sides to have more communication and cooperation, properly handle our differences and disagreements, and to facilitate each other's pursuit of development aspirations.
I'll tell you what's strange. This meeting was possible because of a border deal. It was announced by India on Monday. It allows both sides to disengage and resume patrolling. But Xi Jinping did not even mention that in his opening remarks. He just spoke broadly about communication and differences. Prime Minister Modi, though, did talk about it. He first welcomed the border deal between India and China. He then listed out his expectations from the relationship: mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual sensitivity.
हमारा मानना है कि भारत और चीन के संबंधों का महत्व केवल हमारे लोगों के लिए ही नहीं, लेकिन वैश्विक शांति, स्थिरता और प्रगति के लिए भी हमारे संबंध बहुत अहम है। एक्सेलेंसी, सीमा पार पिछले 4 वर्षों में उत्पन्न हुए मुद्दों पर बनी सहमति का हम स्वागत करते हैं। सीमा पर शांति और स्थिरता बनाए रखना हमारी प्राथमिकता रहनी चाहिए। म्यूचुअल ट्रस्ट, म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट और म्यूचुअल सेंसिटिविटी हमारे संबंधों का आधार बने रहना चाहिए।
Now, let's be clear, these pictures are historic. So is the location of this meeting. Russia, a country that shares excellent ties with both India and China. It will only add to the speculation around Russia's role. Did Putin bring Modi and Xi together? They looked pretty cozy at the dinner yesterday, but officially there is no word on Russian mediation. Either way, just think about everything that has happened in the last 5 years. A deadly clash at the Galwan Valley. Soldiers killed on both sides, massive troop mobilization, India's embrace of the US and the West, China's refusal to disengage, even bans on TikTok and Chinese 5G. It seemed like this relationship was heading to rock bottom. But diplomacy appears to have pulled it back, at least for the time being. Modi and Xi clearly do not want an escalation. They see more benefits in cooperating. But the question is how? How do you start working with your chief rival? In today's meeting, we saw some common ground. Xi Jinping talked about using this relationship to achieve development goals, basically to better the lives of ordinary people. He also talked about an international responsibility that India and China must set an example for the world. You just heard Prime Minister Modi's remarks. He also spoke along the same lines. He said this relationship is key for global security and progress. So there is clear agreement on one thing. A stable India-China relationship is a global good. It's a good start, but it's not nearly enough. India has shown its willingness to cooperate, to invest in this relationship, but China has not responded in kind. We saw evidence of that in the 2020 Galwan clashes. So the key thing is trust. Can India trust China to hold its end of the bargain? Well, this border deal is a good test of that. Let's see if China disengages and de-escalates at the border. Now, I know everyone is talking about the meeting, but that was not the purpose of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia. It was clearly the highlight of the day, a subplot that is more interesting than the movie itself. But the movie is still about BRICS. Today was the 16th summit of this new look group. It started off with 4 members. It now has 10 members. The OG gang is part of the acronym Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. That's BRICS. The newbies are Iran, the UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia and Saudi Arabia. Many more have lined up to join. Today we had 2 sessions in the Russian city of Kazan. One was the open session, the other was behind closed doors. Prime Minister Modi addressed both these sessions. He very clearly spelled out his vision for BRICS. I know we've had some questions about what India wants from this bloc. Well, Prime Minister Modi answered those questions. First of all, is BRICS an anti-West bloc? Listen to what the Indian Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting, "We have to give the world the message that BRICS is not a divisive organization, but one that works in the interest of humanity. We must be careful to ensure that this organization does not acquire the image of one that is trying to replace global institutions, instead of being perceived as one that wishes to reform them." In other words, do not use the BRICS Summit or the BRICS grouping to target the West or to demolish the world order. Use it to reform the world order. That's a very comprehensive clarification. Secondly, is India okay with expanding BRICS? Again, listen to what he said. India is ready to welcome new countries into BRICS as partner countries. In this regard, all decisions should be taken by consensus and the views of BRICS founding members should be respected. The guiding principles, standards, criteria and procedures adopted during the Johannesburg summit should be complied with by all members and partner countries. Again, let me translate that into simpler words. We welcome new members, but we have red lines. For example, India did not block the entry of Iran or Saudi Arabia. But reports say Pakistan is keen to join BRICS. And if that's the case, New Delhi may put its foot down. So all in all, the Prime Minister had a successful summit in Russia. He reaffirmed his commitment to BRICS, drew very clear red lines and highlighted the strengths of this bloc. Of course, years down the line, no one will remember any of this. What they will remember is the Modi-Xi handshake. So the deal is done. The joint statement is expected. India and China are resetting their relationship. But what led to this truce? For 4 years, there was a deadlock. Why did China agree to a border deal now? Why now? Well, some recent events may have forced Beijing to rethink. We are talking about Xi Jinping's growing challenges both at home and abroad. At home, the economy remains a mess. The bad news continues to pile up. The IMF has lowered China's growth forecast. That's the International Monetary Fund. It has released a new projection. It says China will grow by 4.8%. That's this year, 4.8%, and 4.5% in 2025. So it's going to be a steady decline. Last year, the Chinese economy grew by 5.2%. This year, Beijing aimed for 5% growth, but it will most likely fall short of that goal. This economic decline is creating instability and reportedly leading to protests in China. More and more people are taking to the streets. In August, China reported an 18% hike in such protests. Most of these were over the state of the economy, stuff like your stalled housing projects, sudden closure of companies, and delay in payment of wages. So the mood in China overall is grim, and this could spell trouble for the Communist Party. Even small signs of unrest make them anxious. They don't give political freedoms to the people of China, they deliver economic growth. That's where their power stems from. That's what gives legitimacy to the Communist Party of China. That's how they crush dissent with force. It's the deal that the party made with the people of China. You give up your freedoms and we'll give you economic prosperity. But now the party is not holding up its end of the bargain. Beijing has tried to course correct. It unveiled a series of aggressive stimulus measures. But as the numbers from the IMF show, the projections show, they have failed to move the needle. So at home, China's economic challenges are mounting. Outside, the situation is even worse. Xi Jinping faces a tough and uncertain landscape. China is losing friends left, right and center. It is locked in a trade war with Brussels, with the Europeans. Same with the US. There is friction over trade. America is trying to throttle China's advances in the tech sector. It has imposed restrictions on the supply of semiconductors or chips to China. Recently, the US also sanctioned Chinese firms. This is over the Ukraine war. Chinese companies were caught supplying drones to Russia, so the Americans slapped sanctions. All in all, the relations are becoming hostile. Then there are tensions in the Taiwan Strait. China has intensified drills around the island. It conducted a massive exercise this month, using hundreds of warships and warplanes to practice how to attack Taiwan. In response, the West dispatched warships. The US and Canada sent vessels which sailed through the Taiwan Strait on Sunday. And this is how China reacted.
Taiwan is Chinese territory. There is nothing more normal than China's aircraft carriers operating in their own territory and waters. No matter what the Taiwan authorities say or do, it will not change the fact that the two sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to one China. Nor will it change the general trend of Taiwan's eventual and inevitable reunification with China.
Xi Jinping spoke about this too. Before traveling to Russia, he went to China's Fujian province, which was a rare visit, also extremely significant. Because look at where Fujian is located. It is the closest to Taiwan on the Chinese mainland, barely 300 kilometers away. China also has a military base there. It is widely believed that if China decides to invade Taiwan, the attack will be launched from Fujian. So why did Xi Jinping go there? To deliver a message to his troops, to tell them to prepare for war. And he's done this before. He's told them the same thing before. But this time, the Chinese president was more specific. He told the PLA, and I'm quoting, to strengthen their training, to develop what he called solid combat capabilities and strategic deterrence. These statements should not be taken lightly. Xi Jinping refuses to dial down on Taiwan, but to keep this front alive, he'll have to step back elsewhere. He'll have to curtail his global ambitions. So he's scaling down projects like the Belt and Road Initiative. He's focusing more on China's immediate priorities, like fixing the economy and their claims on Taiwan. And this may have led to the truce with India as well. China is also trying to repair relations with Japan and the UK. This week, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi called Tokyo. He spoke with Japan's National Security Advisor. Last week, the UK's Foreign Secretary was in China. Both sides discussed ways to reset the relationship. It seems like Xi Jinping is following the advice of Deng Xiaoping. Deng was China's tallest leader in the 70s and 80s. He opened up China to the world. His most famous words were, "Hide your strength, bide your time." This statement shaped China's foreign policy for decades, until Xi Jinping rose to power and played his hand too soon with his aggressive wolf warrior approach. It did not work. Xi Jinping's power is being tempered by reality.
Нас сплачивают общие ценности.
As expected, all the focus was on Modi meeting Xi Jinping, perhaps more than the summit itself. But the Prime Minister had other engagements too. He met Iran's president yesterday, Masoud Pezeshkian. It was a key meeting for a number of reasons. One, it was their first meeting. Pezeshkian took charge in late July. He succeeded Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash. Now, Raisi was a hardliner, but Pezeshkian is a moderate. He is known as a compassionate reformer in Iran. So this meeting was a chance to get to know him better, to strike up some chemistry. Secondly, Iran is virtually at war. On October 1st, they fired ballistic missiles at Israel, nearly 200 of them. And now they're bracing for an Israeli attack. Their oil facilities, their military sites, their nuclear sites, all of them are on Israel's radar. Plus, Iran controls the Hezbollah in Lebanon, the same Hezbollah that is fighting a war with Israel. Now, this was the background of Tuesday's talks. Prime Minister Modi called for de-escalating tensions. Meanwhile, President Pezeshkian committed to peace and harmony. Listen to this.
West Asia, Prime Minister expressed his deep concern over the escalating conflict. He emphasized the need for dialogue and diplomacy to de-escalate tensions. President Pezeshkian also emphasized on the need for peace and harmony in the region and the role that India could play in de-escalating the conflict given its good relations with all the parties involved.
Now, the Indian statement is short and crisp, but the Iranian one offers a lot more details. Apparently, Pezeshkian talked about Israel's assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the former Hamas chief. He was killed in Tehran during Pezeshkian's inauguration. He also blamed Israel quite a bit, accusing them of massacres and warmongering. And it's not clear how Prime Minister Modi responded to all of that. While the war dominated the discussion, other issues were also raised, mainly Chabahar and Afghanistan. Chabahar is a port in southern Iran. India is building and operating a terminal there. The project was stalled for a long time, but this year both sides struck a deal. India committed to running the terminal for 10 years. It is also investing $120 million in Chabahar. Prime Minister Modi called this port the biggest pillar of the relationship. It tells you how significant it is. India wants to use Chabahar to access Central Asia, that too by bypassing Pakistan. So if the port is up and running, it's great news for India and Iran, sort of like a glue for the relationship. And beyond that, well, trade is still low because of sanctions. The India-Iran trade is just $2.3 billion, negligible for such big nations. Plus, India has been moving closer to Israel. Prime Minister Modi condemned the Hamas attack as terrorism. He defended Israel's right to hit back. He even spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu multiple times on the phone. Could that hurt India's relationship with Iran? Well, we haven't seen indications of that. In fact, both sides have displayed a lot of maturity, a lot of understanding for each other's priorities. Iran knows that India cannot abandon Israel, which is why Tehran is not pushing New Delhi on this issue. Similarly, think back to last month. Iran's supreme leader waded into the Kashmir issue. He said Muslims in Kashmir are suffering. Yet Prime Minister Modi sent his greetings to Ayatollah Khamenei. Like I said, maturity. The fact is, India and Iran will be seeing a lot more of each other. Last year, Tehran joined the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This year, they've joined BRICS. So India and Iran are part of two major multilateral platforms. They have every reason to get along. Also, it fits nicely into India's policy of building bridges, of steering clear of regional rivalries, whether it's Arab-Israel or Arab-Iran or Israel-Iran. India also has financial interests on both sides. You have the Chabahar port in Iran. You have the Europe-India trade corridor in Israel. Netanyahu talked about it at the United Nations General Assembly. He called it the blessing, which is why India has repeatedly called for de-escalation. Picking sides is not an option here. You must balance between the two. Let's turn to Canada now, where Justin Trudeau is getting exposed again. Not by India, though. This time, by the Canadian media. Let me show you a new report by the Globe and Mail. It says Canadian officials leaked intelligence on India to US media, specifically the Washington Post. We're talking about secret documents here, documents that were embargoed by security agencies. Yet Canada leaked those documents to the Washington Post. 2 officials were involved in this leak. Both of them have been outed. The first is Nathalie Drouin. She is National Security Advisor to Justin Trudeau. The second is David Morrison. He is the Deputy Foreign Minister of Canada. We are talking about 2 very senior officials here, people very close to the Prime Minister. If they have leaked something, it means Trudeau signed off, or at least he was aware of it. Earlier this month, these officials spoke to Washington Post. They revealed information on the Khalistan case. Of course, the Washington Post ran with it. They published their piece on October 14th. It linked India to the murder of a Sikh man in Winnipeg. It also singled out Home Minister Amit Shah, the Home Minister of India. The report talked about him. Clearly, Trudeau's ministers told them about all of this, that too without evidence, because Canadian police have not named Amit Shah, nor have they drawn links to the killing in Winnipeg. So the point of this leak was to smear India. And that's not even the worst part. Trudeau willingly allowed intelligence on India to be leaked, but he was livid when intel on China was leaked. He called it a criminal act. Listen to this.
The issue with the criminal who leaked this information is they got it wrong in what they leaked. And regardless of what's in the newspapers or not, it is incumbent upon a serious, responsible government not to react to partisan attacks or erroneous but salacious headlines.
So leaks on China are bad, but leaks on India are fine. Is it because you authorized this one, or because the China leak puts you in a bad light? That's the only explanation. And this isn't a first for Justin Trudeau. He has repeatedly gone easy on China. He has downplayed their meddling in Canadian politics. But what does he object to? Indian media's commentary. If we call out Justin Trudeau's vote bank politics, it is meddling. If we call Hardeep Singh Nijjar a terrorist, it is meddling. If we say Canadian diplomats seem frustrated, it is meddling. Apparently, only anti-Trudeau stuff counts as interference. If you slam the opposition, it's all fine. We saw that during the recent hearings in Canada. Trudeau was called up to testify. He justified the actions of Chinese diplomats in Canada. He said it's part of what they do.
The fact that Chinese diplomats are categorizing MPs and their outreach abilities into those 3 categories is not itself particularly revelatory or new information to me. It is fairly obvious and a part of what diplomats do in all countries in all parts of the world.
The screws are turning on Trudeau. Even India realizes this. Reports say the government is planning a new strategy, the government of India. The plan is to share details of Khalistani extremists with the Five Eyes. Now, Five Eyes is a Western intelligence group. It includes the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and Britain, 5. Trudeau has used the Five Eyes to put pressure on India. So what does New Delhi do? Flip the script. Give details about Khalistanis in Canada to the same Five Eyes. Indian officials have not confirmed this plan yet, but it sounds like an interesting one. And the bad news does not end for Trudeau. His party rebellion is growing. Today, the Prime Minister will attend a closed-door meeting. A lot of his lawmakers are expected to question his leadership, to ask him to step down. Their argument is quite simple. We have elections coming up next year. If a no-confidence motion succeeds, maybe even sooner. And if Trudeau stays on, the Liberal Party, his party, will lose. Opinion polls are very clear about that. So some MPs want Justin Trudeau to step aside. They want to fight the elections under a different leadership. I guess that means his plan failed. Trudeau wanted to divert attention using the Nijjar case, but his party is having none of it. He stands vulnerable, exposed, and isolated. Now let's turn to the war in West Asia. Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar is dead. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah is dead. Israel has also confirmed the death of Nasrallah's potential successor, Hashim Safieddin. So all the big names are gone. Does that mean Israel has come out on top? The US certainly thinks so. They even sent Secretary of State Antony Blinken to convey the message.
Since October 7th, a year ago, Israel has achieved most of its strategic objectives when it comes to Gaza. Now is the time to turn those successes into an enduring strategic success. And there are really two things left to do. Get the hostages home and bring the war to an end with an understanding of what will follow.
Blinken went to West Asia again, his 11th trip since the war began. Like always, he tried to push for a ceasefire. He was always ignored in the past, but this time he had an ace up his sleeve.
But I believe that with Sinwar gone, because he was the primary obstacle to realizing a hostage agreement, there is a real opportunity to bring them home and to accomplish the objective.
That's the new pitch. Sinwar is gone. He's no longer an obstacle to hostage negotiations, so Israel should stop leveling Gaza and work to bring the hostages home instead. That is the pitch, and it has a lot of takers.
We keep on hearing for a long time now that Sinwar was the main obstacle to reach a deal, and now that Sinwar is gone, we are hoping that the pressure from the United States is going to be immense on the parties, whether it's Qatar, Egypt, Israel, and of course Hamas, to finalize the deal and bring them home.
Now that Sinwar is out of the way, now is the time to put pressure on the Hamas leadership in Qatar to lead a negotiation that will bring an end to this madness and bring a hostage deal and seal the deal.
Hamas still holds about 100 Israeli hostages in Gaza. Israeli officials say about 60 of them are still alive. Hamas also holds the bodies of about 35 hostages. They have not been returned yet. The former Hamas chief, Yahya Sinwar, was always blamed for stalling hostage negotiations. Now that he's gone, the families of the hostages want a deal immediately. And they have turned to the US. The families held a protest yesterday outside the hotel where Antony Blinken met with Israeli officials. They demanded that the US put pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The families are not happy with Netanyahu's tactics, and you can see that from the banners and posters they're holding. They want the war to end and the hostages to return, and they aren't the only ones. A new poll shows that 77% of Israelis want to prioritize a hostage deal. With Sinwar dead, they think eradicating Hamas takes a backseat. In fact, more than half of the people surveyed said that it was time to end the war. Even Israeli soldiers are showing their frustration. Almost 140 of them, 140 soldiers, have signed a letter. They say they won't fight anymore, not until Israel signs a hostage deal. So there is growing pressure on the Israeli government and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in particular. And this time he does not have a clear enemy. There is no Sinwar or Ismail Haniyeh or Hassan Nasrallah. There is no enemy leader to point to anymore. So it may be harder for him to convince Israelis to keep fighting in Gaza and Lebanon. But does this mean that Netanyahu will focus on a hostage deal now? Well, reports say that talks are on. 2 parallel deals are being worked on. There's a small-scale deal which involves the release of 5 hostages. This will be in exchange for a 2-week ceasefire in Gaza. There's also a broader deal to free all the hostages. But that will take time. It will require Hamas to choose a new leader and then opening a new round of negotiations. That is how things stand at the moment. Israel is trying to work out a deal, but it may not happen fast enough. Until all the hostages are accounted for, the pressure on Netanyahu will continue to grow. In India, it's festive season, and that often means a lot of travel. On October 14th, Indian Airlines carried more than 484,000 passengers, 484,000. It was a single-day record. So carriers are dealing with record footfall, while they also deal with a bigger problem: hoax bomb threats. In the last 1 week, 170 flights have received them. 170 flights. It's leading to delays, diversions, and cancellations. Schedules are going for a toss. Airlines are losing thousands of dollars, which is why the government is now cracking down. It is mulling a new law to criminalize this. It is also pulling up social media platforms like X. Our next report brings you the details.
The Indian airline industry is in chaos. It isn't because of the holiday season or even the record number of passengers. It's hoax bomb threats. Since last week, 170 flights have received them. They were all operated by Indian carriers. 80 were targeted on Monday night alone. It has led to diversions, cancellation of flights, and a lot of delays.
Bomb threats are very serious issues. You would have seen in the last 24 or 48 hours several such threats have been issued. One of our Air India flights was grounded as well. Several other aircraft also received similar threats. Our agencies, Ministry of Home Affairs and other relevant agencies, they are looking into the matter.
Most of them were domestic flights, but some were flying international routes. And that led to even more chaos. You see, when a threat like this comes in, multiple protocols are put into action. If the plane is on the ground, it is searched again. But the problem is bigger when the plane is up in the air. It is diverted to the nearest airport, like an Air India flight from Delhi to Chicago that was diverted to Canada. Some countries like Singapore even scrambled fighter jets to escort the flights. Now the protocol dictates that once the flight lands, all passengers are deboarded. Everything is searched once again. This could take several hours. There are cancellations, schedules are affected. All of this costs airlines thousands of dollars, even if all the bomb threats are a hoax. So who is behind these threats? Last week, the government arrested a 17-year-old. He's a school dropout. He created a social media account to issue such threats. No one knows what his motive was.
No, we can't comment anything like a conspiracy, but whatever little bit we have known, it's coming from minors or some pranksters. Genuinely, for some very little petty things, they are trying to do these kind of threats on the social media or through phone calls. So they are all very minor and isolated incidents. There is no kind of conspiracy that we can comment on.
Usually, there are a lot of reasons behind hoax bomb threats. It could be malicious intent, trying to pull off a prank, or even trying to derail an industry. Usually they come from lone wolves, but there's a pattern to all of this. Once a hoax threat starts, many more appear in a short span of time. It's to take advantage of the situation. The Indian government is now cracking the whip and going after social media. It pulled up the social media platform X. Most of the threats were posted on the platform. Yet, X hasn't shared the details of the accounts behind it. India says this amounts to abetting a crime. The government is also introducing new punishments. Making such threats will become a cognizable offence. India wants to amend the 1982 Civil Aviation Act so that they can be arrested and investigated without a court order. It also plans to put the offenders on a no-fly list. India is one of the fastest growing aviation markets right now. It witnessed record footfall in October. But threats like these cause major turbulence to its sky-high ambitions.
In the United States, the presidential election is less than 2 weeks away and early voting has begun. As the name suggests, it's when people vote before the election day. That's early voting, because sometimes you cannot vote on the election day because of prior commitments or travel or a whole lot of reasons. So America allows people to vote early. You can do it in person or send in your ballot. Right now, early voting is on in 40 states. 20 million people have already cast their ballots. Out of these, 43% were Democrats and 34% were Republicans. Now, Democrats usually do vote early, but this time Republicans are also turning out in large numbers.
I'm voting for Donald J. Trump, and the reason being I love his policies.
She's got a good head on her shoulders.
So, bipartisan early voting is back. And it's crucial in an election as close as this one. Look at the nationwide polls. Kamala Harris is polling at 48.1%. Donald Trump is at 46.3%. So Harris is leading by 1.8 percentage points. It doesn't mean very much. It falls within the margin of error. Then there are the key swing states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada. They decide who wins this election. Trump and Harris are tied in these states. It tells you how close the contest is. So what are the two parties doing? Well, Harris is touring the battleground states, the swing states that we just mentioned. So is her running mate Tim Walz. They have Barack Obama backing them. He even took to rapping to woo some voters.
You know, I have done a lot of rallies, so I don't usually get nervous. But I was feeling some kind of way following Eminem. I mean, I notice my palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, vomit on my sweater already, mom's spaghetti. I'm nervous, but on the surface I look calm and ready to drop bombs, but I keep on forgetting.
Eminem and Obama, Democrats are bringing out some big names. It also betrays their desperation. After these rallies, Harris is taking an unlikely detour. She's going to the red states, Texas, Kentucky, and Florida. Now, in America, states are called red and blue according to their political preference. Red states vote for Republicans, blue states vote for Democrats. Only a handful of states keep swinging between red and blue. These are the swing states. And most candidates focus their energy on the swing states. Then why is Kamala Harris going to red states? What's her campaign strategy? Especially with respect to Texas. This is the reddest of red states. It's voted for the Republican Party in the last 10 presidential elections. So 40 years. And that's not going to change this time. So why is Kamala Harris campaigning in Texas? Apparently, the Democrats are not going to get the votes, or not going to do it to get the votes. Their strategy is to highlight a problem. Texas has some of the strictest abortion laws in America, and Harris wants to use that as a pitch to say, vote for Harris or you will have no abortion rights, like in Texas. Same with Trump. He campaigned in California. It's a deep blue state, also Kamala Harris's home state. So why did he go there? To grab the headlines. Trump may not get those votes, but he sure got the eyeballs. And now he's going to New York, again a safe blue state. It's voted for Democrats in the last 9 elections. Yet Trump is heading to New York City, where he was born. He'll campaign there on Sunday at the Madison Square Garden.
This election is a choice between whether we will have 4 more years of incompetence, failure, and disaster, or whether we'll begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. We'll do something that nobody will even believe.
So campaigning is on in full swing, but what's a U.S. election without some foreign interference? Washington has its usual list of suspects: China, Russia, Iran. Now Donald Trump is adding a new name to this list: the United Kingdom. Trump has filed a complaint with the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. It is against the UK's Labour Party. Trump accuses them of foreign interference. He says they are helping the Harris campaign. How? Well, some Labour activists are campaigning for Harris. Trump calls it foreign interference. And this is what the UK has to say.
People in their own time often go and campaign, and that's what we've seen. It happens in all political parties. People go and campaign, and they do what they want to do in their own time with their own money.
Is this illegal? According to American election rules, no, it's not. Foreign nationals are allowed to serve as campaign volunteers. That is, if they're not compensated by any party or group. And this is not the first time it has happened. Labour activists have long campaigned in US elections. Also, they're there in their personal capacity. The party does not send them. So technically, it is not against the law. But Donald Trump is not convinced. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is desperate to play down the row. But as the election day draws closer, controversies like this will only grow bigger. Our next story is about Turkey. Their president is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's been in power since 2003, more than 21 years. Erdogan stuck around for quite a long time. But he nearly lost it all back in 2016. There was a coup attempt in Turkey. It failed, obviously. Erdogan is still in charge. And he used that coup attempt to purge his rivals. But one rival managed to evade him. The person Erdogan accused of masterminding the coup. He was a cleric named Fethullah Gulen. I say was because Gulen has passed away. He died on Sunday. He was 83 years old. Now, you might think that Erdogan would be happy about this. An old rival accused of plotting his ouster is no more. But the Turkish president is far from joyous. Instead, he has promised to hunt down Gulen's followers to the farthest corners of the world. Here's our report.
Those who turn the children of the nation into mindless slaves under the guise of service and charity have ended up with a dishonorable death, akin to other demons in human form throughout history. Despite all our efforts, these traitors unfortunately managed to escape Turkish justice thanks to the ones who protect them. They left this world without being held accountable for the crimes they committed, the young minds they corrupted, and the martyrs' blood they shed, but they will not be able to escape divine justice.
That was Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He gave that speech after the death of his nemesis, a Turkish cleric called Fethullah Gülen. Gülen was the founder of an international movement. It tried to bring together Sufi traditions in Islam and science, education, and interfaith dialogue. Gülen died on Sunday. He passed away at the age of 83 due to natural causes. Erdogan is livid. He says Gülen managed to escape Turkish justice. So what did Gülen do to invite this wrath? Well, according to Erdogan, Gülen was the mastermind behind the failed Turkish coup in 2016. It's a charge that Gülen always denied.
I have never supported a coup or an ouster. I think any change should happen as a result of an election, if that is required. It is important that democracy is not harmed.
5 days after the failed coup, Erdogan branded Gülen's organization a terrorist group. They called it the Fethullah Gülen Terrorist Organization, or FETO. And the Turkish government began a purge. At least 77,000 people were arrested. 150,000 government workers, like teachers, judges, and even soldiers, they were suspended from their jobs. It was a crackdown on anyone linked to Gülen's movement. Erdogan used the opportunity to go after other opponents as well, but that was a bonus for him. The main target remained Gülen and his followers. Erdogan insisted that they were the masterminds of the failed coup, but he had been at loggerheads with Gülen even before the coup attempt. In fact, it was a tale of friends turned bitter foes. Gülen had helped Erdogan get elected the first time in 2003. Gülen's massive organization, all of his charities and media networks, had supported Erdogan's first prime ministerial bid. But the pair had a falling out. In 2013, Erdogan discovered that some investigations were underway. Corruption probes linked to ministers and officials close to him. The prosecutors and police officers leading these investigations were reportedly affiliated with Gülen. That is when Gülen became Erdogan's enemy. 3 years later, Erdogan used the failed coup as an excuse to eradicate Gülen's influence in Turkey. It's been 8 years since the failed coup, but Erdogan is still after Gülen's followers all over the world. Some of them were abducted in Kenya last week and then sent to Turkey.
All the institutions of our state, whether at home or in the farthest corner of the world, will definitely be on the back of the FETO hyena pack.
Gülen may be dead, but Erdogan's witch hunt is far from over.
Our next story is about an idea that belongs in a science fiction blockbuster, but it could also solve our climate change woes. Scientists want to spray diamonds into the sky. Not actual diamonds, of course, diamond dust. 5 million tons of it. They want to inject it into the atmosphere, hoping that it blocks the sunlight and cools our planet. But will it work? More importantly, how much will it cost? And what are some of the other strange solutions to global warming? Here's a report.
1.5. It's a small number in itself, But add the term degrees Celsius to it and you get a dangerous threshold. A temperature increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius. After which, our planet will witness the brutally dangerous impacts of global warming. Longer heat waves, worse wildfires, more intense storms. You name it, and we're likely to see it. If we breach the 1.5 Celsius degrees limit, it would be calamitous for the world. And scientists say that day is not too far. There is a high chance that the world will cross this limit before 2027, so the clock is ticking. Governments are under pressure to find solutions. And one solution could be an unlikely source: diamonds. Scientists want to spray diamonds into the sky. Not actual diamonds, of course. They want to inject the atmosphere with diamond dust. How much? 5 million tons of it, hoping that this reduces global warming. So, how does it work? Think of volcano dust. When a volcano erupts, it doesn't just spew lava, it releases smoke and dust particles, huge amounts of them. These particles cover the atmosphere and reflect sunlight back into space, cooling the area. So much so that they can cause what's called a volcanic winter. We last saw this in 1991 when Mount Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines. It cooled the Earth by 0.5 degrees for many years. Scientists want to replicate this phenomenon. They want to spray diamond dust in the atmosphere so it reflects sunlight and cools the planet. If this happens annually, if 5 million tons of diamond dust is injected each year, it can cool the Earth by 1.6 degrees Celsius, undoing a lot of damage of the past. So, can we expect a sky full of diamonds anytime soon? It's a tough possibility. First, this has never been done before. It's not an easy task to manage. And secondly, it costs a lot of money, at least $200 trillion. After all, diamonds are involved. Let's put that into perspective. $200 trillion is roughly 800 times more than the net worth of Elon Musk, the richest person in the world. So it's a costly plan. But if it doesn't work out, scientists have other ideas as well. At this point, us Earthlings are a lot like teenagers preparing for exams. We know the syllabus, we know we haven't studied, and we can forecast the repercussions. But instead of doing the hard work, we need a cheat code, or in this case, a climate fix. Like dumping iron in the oceans, spraying aerosols into the atmosphere, or launching mirrors into space. There are a number of bizarre ideas on the list. But who knows? Maybe sending diamonds into the atmosphere could be our solution in the rough.
Now let's turn our attention to South Korea, which is winning two races. One in low fertility and two in suicide rates. Simply put, South Korea has the lowest fertility rate in the world and the world's highest suicide rate. These are two big problems for the country, and both largely have the same root: loneliness, meaning the gap in social connection, the gap between the level of connectedness that people want and what they have. And with each passing year, this gap is increasing. 77% Koreans are lonely, 40% are severely lonely. Not something to be taken lightly, because loneliness can be deadly. As deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It increases the risk of early death by 39%. And do you know what this ultimately results in? What happens when 77% people in your country report loneliness? It's deadly for the social fabric. People don't want to get married, they don't want to have children, the workforce loses productivity, the health system is overburdened, and there is a heavy price to pay. I'm talking about the literal financial cost of loneliness to the South Korean society. It is $6.5 billion every year. $6.5 billion. Like I said, loneliness is not to be taken lightly. So what is Seoul doing about it? Well, they want to spend more money. Seoul has allocated about $330 million to fight loneliness. They will spend it over the next 5 years by offering counseling services, emergency interventions, and networking options like cooking classes and community spaces where people can eat ramen together. But will it work? Not to sound too pessimistic, but it is unlikely to work because this is not the first time Seoul is throwing money at the loneliness problem. Last year, they started a campaign for isolated youth who are withdrawing from society. South Korea started giving them a monthly allowance, about $500, so they can re-enter society. And did they? Well, barely. Money did not make the problem go away because in South Korea, loneliness is not a personal issue. It is not just a financial issue either. It's not about having someone to eat ramen with. Loneliness in South Korea is a societal issue. It's about the rising cost of living, the lack of jobs, oppressive work culture, sexist gender roles, the fear of not meeting expectations, the lack of fulfillment. It's sort of a vicious cycle. A host of problems are contributing to South Korean loneliness. And $500 will not fix it. The same applies to other countries, by the way, because this is not just a South Korean or a Korean problem. 30% Americans are lonely, so are 41% Italians and 43% Indians. In fact, 1/3 of the world is lonely. It's a global epidemic, and nations are battling it in their own ways. Countries like Canada, Ireland, and Australia have volunteer programs where people can chat with the lonely. Some countries have medical interventions, like the Netherlands. Here, doctors assess a patient's loneliness level. Others have awareness campaigns, like Sweden's Say Hello campaign. It nudges people to talk to strangers. As shady as it sounds, the aim is to create a friendlier society. The UK has what they call chatty benches, again, where strangers can talk to each other. Meanwhile, Japan has adopted strict measures. 39% Japanese people are lonely. Within the first half of this year, loneliness killed, and listen to this, loneliness killed nearly 40,000 people. So on the 1st of April, Tokyo enacted a law which obligates local governments to fight loneliness. Plus, they have a loneliness minister. Now, all of these measures are quite important. They're a step in the right direction, but their success rate is low because what's happening in South Korea is happening everywhere else too. These interventions cannot combat social isolation because they operate in a void. Countries need to build a strong social safety net, a complex mesh of social development and public policies, because loneliness is not permanent. With the right support, we can all learn to connect again. Let me introduce the newest British citizen, the fictional bear Paddington. This character was created way back in 1958. It is supposed to be a refugee bear. He arrived as a stowaway from Peru to London, but in a new movie, he's heading back home. He's going to Peru to see his aunt. Of course, to travel abroad, you need a passport. So the movie makers asked the British Home Office for a fake one, but they issued a real one, an actual passport for a fake bear. No shuttling off to Rwanda, no name-calling or racist slurs. This migrant got a passport pretty easily. The movie makers are quite thrilled about it. They say the folks at the Home Office have a great sense of humor. Maybe they do. But so do people on the internet. Take a look. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Bangladeshi protesters try to storm the presidential palace, demanding the president's resignation. A cello-playing robot performs alongside an orchestra for the first time in history, and animals enjoy early Halloween treats in a London zoo. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, a portable media player that could store more than 1,000 songs. At that time, it was a revolutionary product. It transformed Apple from a niche computer company into a leader in consumer electronics. Apple discontinued in 2022. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.